You give me a baby, I will pay your debt. But after a passionate night, he refuses to let her go. Hello, my most beautiful, loyal, and priceless family. How are you today? You are not just my audience, you are my heart's joy, my divine blessing, my unshakable support. Every word I speak, every story I tell is wrapped in love for you. You are my forever family, and I cherish you more than words can ever express. Here's a tender, love-filled prayer just for you. Dear loving Father, please embrace my precious family in your gentle arms. Let their days overflow with grace, their nights be filled with peace, and their hearts glow with unshakable hope. Heal their pain, answer their quiet prayers, and cover them in the sweetness of your love. Let them feel how deeply they are treasured. Amen. My beautiful family, if these words wrapped around your heart, show your love. Like, comment, and share. Because our comeback is not just near, it's written in the stars. Comment down below. I am Mr. Peter. Let the world hear our heartbeat. Together, we rise again. With nothing but love. The hurricane roared like a vengeful beast as it tore through Miami's coastline, ripping away everything in its path. Dominica Davis clutched her soaked jacket tighter around her trembling body, watching through the rain-lashed windows of the Ocean View Hotel as her dream, Sweet Solace Cafe, disappeared beneath the furious waves. All those years of saving, she whispered, her voice lost in the howl of the wind, gone in a single night. Her chocolate-brown skin glistened with raindrops that mingled with silent tears. At 32, Dominica had poured her entire inheritance, her savings and her heart, into that little cafe with its ocean-blue walls and handwritten menu cards. Now she had nothing but the drenched clothes on her back and her grandmother's locket around her neck. The hotel lobby buzzed with displaced residents seeking shelter from the Category 5 hurricane. Children cried, adults spoke in hushed, worried tones, and emergency workers rushed back and forth with blankets and supplies. Dominica stood apart from them all, alone in her devastation. "Mom, you're soaking the marble." The deep voice startled her. She turned to find herself staring into the most intense blue eyes she'd ever seen, the color of the ocean during a calm summer day, a jarring contrast to the storm raging outside. The man was tall, powerfully built, with chiseled features that seemed carved from stone and dark blonde hair that fell carelessly across his forehead. "I'm sorry," she managed, becoming aware of the puddle forming beneath her feet. "I'll move." "That's not what I meant," he said, his gaze softening slightly as he took in her disheveled appearance. "You need dry clothes and a hot drink before you catch pneumonia." Before she could respond, he removed his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The warm fabric carried his scent, sandalwood, mint, and something uniquely masculine that made her breath catch. Heat radiated from where his fingers brushed against her collarbone, a strange electricity that had nothing to do with the lightning. "Outside, I don't need charity," she said, though she made no move to return his jacket. His lips curved into a half-smile that transformed his severe features. "Consider it a loan, then." An older man in a hotel uniform approached, bowing slightly. "Mr. Butler, your suite is ready." Butler, the name registered dimly in Dominica's mind. Sam Butler, billionaire CEO of Butler Enterprises, whose face regularly graced business magazines. What was he doing here in the middle of a hurricane? "Perfect timing, Jerome," Sam replied, then turned to Dominica. "My penthouse has plenty of room, and more importantly, its own generator. You'll be more comfortable there than in this crowded lobby." Dominica stiffened. "I don't even know you." "Sam Butler," he said, extending his hand. When she reluctantly placed her smaller one in his, instead of shaking it, he turned it over and pressed his warm lips to her wrist, just above her pulse point. The unexpected gesture sent a jolt through her body that had nothing to do with the cold. "And you are?" "Dominica Davis," she replied, trying to ignore how her skin tingled where his lips had touched. "And I can't accept your offer, Mr. Butler." "Why not? You've lost your home to the hurricane, correct?" His direct gaze seemed to see right through her. She swallowed hard. "Not just my home, my business, my cafe, everything." Something flickered. In those ocean blue eyes, recognition perhaps, or understanding. "All the more reason to accept help when it's offered, Miss Davis." A crash of thunder shook the building, making the lights flicker ominously. Several people gasped. "The generator in the lobby isn't powerful enough to last through the night," Sam continued. "The penthouse suite has its own system. You'll be safe there." Dominica hesitated, weighing her pride against practicality. She had nowhere else to go, and the thought of spending the night in this crowded lobby was unappealing at best. "And for tonight," she finally conceded. His smile was triumphant but gentle. "Just for tonight," he agreed. The elevator ascended silently toward the penthouse, each floor increasing the curious tension between them. Despite the disaster surrounding them, Dominica found herself hyper-aware of this stranger's presence, the subtle scent of his cologne as she clutched his jacket around her shoulders, the controlled strength in his posture, the way his gaze occasionally sought hers in the elevator's mirrored walls. The penthouse suite was more magnificent than anything she had ever seen. A sprawling space of gleaming hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows that would have offered a spectacular view of the ocean had it not been obscured by the storm, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. "The guest room is through there," Sam said, pointing to a door off the main living area. "You'll find robes. In the bathroom, give me your wet clothes and I'll have them dried." Dominica raised an eyebrow. "You personally handle laundry?" A chuckle escaped him, warm and unexpectedly genuine. "No, but the hotel staff does, even during hurricanes, especially for their most valued guests." In the luxurious bathroom, Dominica stripped off her soaked clothing and stepped into a shower, hot enough to steam away the chill that had settled into her bones. As the water cascaded over her curves, she tried not to think about the enigmatic man just beyond the door, or why he had chosen to help her. Wrapped in a plush robe that felt like a cloud against her skin, she emerged to find a tray with steaming tea and sandwiches waiting on the bed. Sam was nowhere to be seen, but a note rested beside the tray. "Thought you might be hungry. Rest well, Ms. Davis. The storm will pass by morning." His handwriting was strong and assertive, just like him. Dominica sank onto the bed, suddenly aware of her exhaustion. As she sipped the perfectly brewed chamomile tea, she wondered why a billionaire would notice, much less care about, a drenched woman in a hotel lobby. Sleep claimed her quickly, the comfort of the bed, a stark contrast to the devastation she'd witnessed earlier. She didn't hear the door open slightly hours later, didn't see Sam Butler's tall frame pausing in the doorway, his gaze lingering on her peaceful face, illuminated by a flash of lightning. He stood there longer than he should have, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest, struck by an inexplicable urge to protect this woman he'd just met. When she stirred slightly in her sleep, murmuring something inaudible, he closed the door silently and retreated to his own room, unnerved by the strange pull he felt toward her. Outside, the hurricane raged on, unaware that beneath its destructive fury, something equally powerful had begun to stir between two strangers who had no idea how completely their lives were about to change. Chapter 2. Dangerous Proposition. 2 weeks after the hurricane, Dominica stood in her tiny rented apartment, staring at the final notice from the bank. The words blurred before her eyes, but their meaning was crystal clear. Without a miracle, she would lose even the memory of her beloved cafe. Insurance had covered only a fraction of her losses. The loan payments loomed like hungry predators, waiting to devour what little remained of her savings. She'd applied for disaster relief, begged for extensions, even approached friends for loans. Nothing had worked. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Unknown number. "Hello?" she answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued sorting through bills. "Ms. Davis." The rich, deep voice was unmistakable. "Sam Butler." Her heart stuttered unexpectedly. "Mr. Butler, how did you get my number?" A soft chuckle warmed her ear. "I have my resources. How are you settling in after the hurricane?" Dominica glanced around her sparse apartment, a far cry from both her cozy home above the cafe and certainly from the luxurious hotel suite she'd occupied for that single night. "I'm managing," she replied, trying to keep the defeat from her voice. "Was there something you needed, Mr. Butler?" "Sam," he corrected, "and yes, I'd like to see you again." The directness of his statement caught her off guard. She'd left the morning after the storm without seeing him, leaving only a handwritten thank-you note for his kindness. Why? The question slipped out before she could censor it. Another chuckle, lower this time. "I have a proposal I believe might interest you. Business," he added after a weighted pause. "My car will collect you tomorrow at 7. Wear something nice." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Dominica stared at her phone, indignation warring with curiosity. The audacity of the man, issuing commands rather than invitations. Yet the mention of business stirred a flicker of hope she couldn't afford to dismiss. The next evening, a sleek black Bentley whisked her away to the Butler estate, a modernist marvel of glass and steel perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. As the car wound up the private drive, Dominica smoothed the emerald silk dress she'd rescued from her apartment before the hurricane, one of the few nice things she'd managed to save. Sam Butler greeted her at the door himself, his powerful frame outlined against the warm light from inside. His eyes widened slightly as they swept over her, lingering on the way the silk hugged her curves. "You look exquisite," he said, his voice rougher than she remembered. Up close, he was even more devastating, cold, dark eyelashes framing those ocean eyes, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, lips that curved into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He wore casual elegance well, dark trousers and a crisp white shirt with sleeves rolled to reveal tanned, muscular forearms. "Your home is beautiful," Dominica said as he led her through an atrium filled with tropical plants and modern sculptures. "It's a house," he corrected, something wistful coloring his tone. "I'm not sure I've ever had a home." The statement hung between them, unexpectedly intimate, as they entered a vast living room dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the moonlit ocean. A staff member appeared silently with champagne. Sam took 2 flutes, handing one to Dominica. "To new beginnings," he said, his eyes never leaving hers as they clinked glasses. The champagne was exquisite, but Dominica barely tasted it. "You mentioned a business proposal?" Sam gestured toward the plush seating area. "Direct. I appreciate that about you." He sat not across from her, but beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell his intoxicating scent. When he crossed his legs, his knee brushed against hers, and she felt the contact like an electric shock. "I'll be equally direct," he continued, swirling the champagne in his glass. "I'm 39 years old. I've built an empire, accumulated more wealth than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, but I have no legacy." Dominica frowned slightly. "Surely, Butler Enterprises is your legacy?" His laugh held no humor. "Corporations aren't legacies, Dominica. Children are." Her breath caught at his casual use of her first name, the way it rolled off his tongue, like he'd been saying it for years. "I was married once," Sam continued, his jaw tightening. "Victoria proved to be more interested in my money than in building a life with me. She wasn't interested in children. They would have interfered with her social calendar." He stood abruptly, moving to the window. The moonlight carved shadows beneath his cheekbones, highlighting the tension in his shoulders. The divorce was finalized 8 months ago. I have no interest in marriage again. Love is a fairy tale sold to fools. But I want a child, an heir. Dominica's pulse quickened as understanding dawned. And what does this have to do with me? Sam turned, his eyes darkening as they locked with hers. He moved toward her with the fluid grace of a predator, stopping directly in front of where she sat. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to a near whisper. I want you to be the mother of my child. The statement fell between them like a thing, both outrageous and somehow inevitable, as if their entire acquaintance had been leading to this moment. Excuse me? Dominica rose from her seat, instinctively seeking equal footing despite the impossibility of matching his height. Even in her heels, the top of her head barely reached his chin, yet she straightened her spine, refusing to be diminished by his stature or his wealth. In exchange, he continued, undeterred by her reaction, I'll clear all your debts, finance the rebuilding of your cafe, set up a trust fund for your future security. Dominica stepped backward, her legs hitting the sofa. You can't be serious. I'm always serious about business, Dominica. He followed her retreat, moving close enough that she could feel his breath on her face. And this would be strictly business, a contractual arrangement. You want to buy a baby? She hissed, anger surging through her. Buy me? I want to provide security for my child, he corrected smoothly, and compensate you fairly for your contribution. My contribution? Dominica laughed incredulously. You mean 9 months of pregnancy? My body changing permanently, the emotional impact of carrying a child only to hand it over. That contribution. A muscle ticked in Sam's jaw. You would have visitation rights. I'm not a monster, Dominica. Just a man who thinks everything has a price tag. Instead of anger, her accusation drew a sad smile. Experience has taught me that, yes. Something in his expression, a flash of vulnerability quickly masked, gave her pause. Before she could respond, he moved closer still, one hand coming up to brush a stray curl from her face. The gentle touch contradicted everything about their conversation. Think of your cafe, he murmured, his fingers trailing down to trace her jawline. All your hard work, your dreams. I can make it happen again. Dominica tried to ignore how her skin tingled under his touch, how her body responded to his proximity with a rush of heat. Why me? You could afford any surrogate. Sam's eyes darkened, his gaze dropping to her lips. Because from the moment I saw you in that lobby, I haven't been able to get you out of my mind. The confession hung between them, shifting the atmosphere from business to something far more dangerous. Dominica knew she should leave, should be outraged by his proposition. Instead, she remained frozen, caught in the gravity of his presence. This is insane, she whispered. Perhaps. His thumb brushed across her lower lip, sending a shiver down her spine. But the best business decisions often appear irrational at first glance. Is that what this is? A business decision? Sam's other hand found her waist, drawing her closer until barely an inch separated their bodies. What if I said it could be more? Dominica's pulse thundered in her ears as his head lowered toward hers, giving her ample time to pull away. She didn't. His lips brushed hers tentatively at first, then with growing hunger as she responded. What began as a question transformed into a declaration as his arms encircled her completely, molding her body to his. The kiss deepened, consuming rational thought. His hands tangled in her curls, angling her head to give him better access. Dominica clutched at his shoulders, torn between pushing him away and pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Sam rested his forehead against hers. Tell me you don't feel it too, he whispered. The honorable thing would be to leave, to reject his outlandish proposition, and the undeniable attraction clouding her judgment. But with her dreams in ruins and his touch igniting something primal within her, honor seemed a distant concept. "One night," she heard herself say, hardly recognizing her own voice, "to see if this, whatever this is real. No contracts, no commitments. Then I'll give you my answer." Something flashed in Sam's eyes, triumph, desire, or perhaps something deeper. Without a word, he swept her into his arms and carried her toward the master suite, each step taking them further from reason and closer to a dangerous proposition that would irreversibly alter both their lives. Chapter 3. Intoxicating Addiction. Sam Butler stared at the quarterly reports spread across his mahogany desk, the figures blurring before his eyes. It had been 3 weeks since that night with Dominica, 3 weeks of distraction and obsession that threatened his carefully constructed control. "Mr. Butler?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The board is waiting in the conference room." Sam pinched the bridge of his nose, willing himself to focus. "Tell them I'll be 5 minutes." He stood, straightening his Italian silk tie, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office. Miami sprawled before him, glittering, under the midday sun, but all he could see was Dominica's face in the throes of passion, her eyes half-closed, lips parted, skin flushed with desire. "Damn it!" he muttered, adjusting his stance as his body responded to the memory. That night, meant to be a strategic move in their negotiation, had unexpectedly shattered his control. The vulnerability in her eyes when passion overtook her, the way her body fit perfectly with his, these moments replayed endlessly in his mind. For the first time, Sam Butler found himself wanting something beyond his usual acquisitions, a connection that couldn't be purchased or contracted. She hadn't given him an answer about his proposition. Instead, she'd slipped away at dawn with a gentle kiss and a whispered, "I need time." He'd respected her request, keeping his distance despite every instinct screaming to pursue her. But tonight, his restraint had reached its breaking point. The board meeting dragged interminably, his mind drifting to Dominica every few minutes. When his CFO asked about projections for the fourth quarter, Sam realized he'd been drawing the curve of her hip on his notepad. "That will be all for today," he announced abruptly, rising from his chair. "We'll reconvene next week." Ignoring the surprised expressions of his executives, Sam strode from the conference room, already loosening his tie. "Cancel my appointments for the rest of the day," he instructed his assistant. 30 minutes later, rain pounded against the windshield of his Aston Martin as he navigated through Miami's evening traffic toward the address he'd memorized from her file. The modest apartment building in Little Havana stood in stark contrast to his oceanfront mansion. Lightning split the sky as Sam stood outside her door, rain soaking through his tailored suit. He'd left his umbrella in the car, too impatient to remember such practicalities. His hand hovered over the doorbell, doubt suddenly assailing him. What was he doing here? This wasn't like him. This desperate, unplanned pursuit. Before he could retreat, the door swung open. Dominica stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes widening at the sight of him, drenched, disheveled, and clearly uninvited. "Sam." His name on her lips sent a jolt of electricity through him. She wore simple cotton pajama shorts and a tank top that revealed the smooth expanse of her shoulders and long-toned legs. Her hair hung in loose curls around her face, free from the elegant updo she'd worn at his estate. "I tried to stay away," he said, his voice rougher than intended. Water dripped from his hair onto his face. "I can't stop thinking about you." Dominica's expression softened, something vulnerable flickering in her dark eyes. "You're soaked. Come in before you catch pneumonia." "Is that good or bad?" Sam asked, surprising himself with how much her answer mattered. She smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face and pierced something long dormant in his chest. "I'm still deciding." He pulled her closer, inhaling the scent of her shampoo. "I can be patient." The lie came easily. Patience had never been his virtue. But for her, he would try. 2 weeks later, Dominica stared at the pregnancy test on her bathroom counter, the 2 pink lines unmistakable even. In the dim lighting, pregnant, with Sam Butler's child. They'd been careful, at least she thought they had. But their passion had been so all-consuming, so desperate each time, that perhaps precautions had failed. Or perhaps fate had other plans. Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone, scrolling to Sam's number. Before she could press call, a knock sounded at her apartment door. She opened it to find Sam standing there, a bouquet of wildflowers in one hand, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her. "I was in the neighborhood," he said, the obvious lie making her smile despite her inner turmoil. He'd been in the neighborhood almost every night since that first rainy evening, unable to stay away from her for longer than a day. Their passionate encounters had evolved into something more. Quiet conversations afterward, shared meals, laughter that surprised them both with its ease. "We need to talk," Dominica said, stepping aside to let him enter. Sam's smile faltered at her serious tone. "What's wrong?" Instead of answering, she took his hand and led him to the bathroom, where the pregnancy test still lay on the counter. He stared at it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her astonishment, he sank to his knees before her, rapping, his arms around her waist and pressing his face against her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." The tenderness of the gesture brought unexpected tears to Dominica's eyes as she threaded her fingers through his hair. This wasn't the reaction she'd anticipated from the cold, calculating businessman who had proposed their arrangement so dispassionately. Sam looked up at her, his blue eyes shining with something that looked dangerously close to adoration. "Move in with me," he said. "Let me take care of you both." And despite all her misgivings, despite her fierce independence and the voice in her head warning that this was moving too fast, Dominica found herself nodding, surrendering to the intoxicating addiction that had claimed them both. Chapter 4. Surrender to desire. "I don't need a team of decorators to set up a nursery that won't be used for months," Dominica insisted, hands on her hips as she faced Sam across the expansive kitchen island of his oceanfront mansion. 3 weeks into living together, and they'd already established a pattern. Sam attempting to solve everything with money, Dominica fiercely guarding her independence. "The best designers are booked months in advance," he countered, sliding a cup of ginger tea toward her. Morning sickness had plagued her for days. "We need to get ahead of it." Dominica accepted the tea with a small nod of thanks. "The baby won't care if their crib is designer or from a department store, Sam." His jaw tightened, the way it always did when she challenged his extravagance. "My child deserves the best." "Our child," she corrected quietly, one hand instinctively moving to her abdomen, though no bump was visible yet beneath her silk robe. Something softened in Sam's expression. He rounded the island and drew her against his chest, his warmth enveloping her. "Our child," he amended, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I'm still getting used to that." Dominica relaxed into his embrace despite her irritation. These moments of vulnerability from Sam were rare, precious glimpses beneath the powerful CEO exterior. "I have meetings all day," he said, reluctantly releasing her. "Will you be all right here alone?" She pulled back, arching an eyebrow. "I managed to survive 32 years without you, Sam. I think I can handle a day in your absurdly comfortable mansion." His laugh was rich and warm, sending a flutter through her chest that she tried to ignore. This wasn't supposed to be emotional. It was practical, a mutually beneficial arrangement. Yet with each passing day, the lines blurred further. "Use the house account for anything you need," Sam said, collecting his suit jacket from where he'd draped it over a bar stool. Antonio can drive you wherever you want to go. I have my own car, she reminded him, which is 10 years old, and probably not the safest. Don't start, Dominica warned, cutting him off before another argument could begin. Go to your meetings. I'll be fine. Sam hesitated, then pulled her close for a kiss that started gentle, but quickly deepened, his hands tangling in her curls as he backed her against the counter. By the time he pulled away, they were both breathing hard. Something to remember me by, he murmured against her lips. After he left, Dominica wandered through the mansion that still didn't feel like home. Her salvaged belongings looked out of place among Sam's minimalist decor and expensive art. The only room that felt remotely comfortable was the library, with its worn leather chairs and shelves of books that showed evidence of actually being. Read. She selected a novel and settled into a chair overlooking the ocean, but found herself unable to focus on the words. Instead, her thoughts kept returning to Sam and the bewildering situation she found herself in. This wasn't how she had imagined her life unfolding. She'd planned to expand her cafe, perhaps open a second location. Romance had been an afterthought, motherhood a distant future consideration. Now here she was, pregnant with a billionaire's baby, living in his home, becoming increasingly dependent on a man who'd originally approached her with a cold business proposition. Yet there was nothing business-like about the way Sam touched her at night, or the tenderness in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. He seemed as caught off guard by their connection as she was, his carefully constructed walls crumbling a little more each day. As evening approached, dark clouds gathered over the ocean, rumbling with the promise of a storm. Dominica stood on the covered terrace, watching lightning dance across the water as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. The electricity flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging the mansion into darkness. Seconds later, her phone rang. Sam. The storm knocked out power in your area, he said without preamble. I'm stuck downtown in meetings. The generator should kick in automatically for essential systems. I'll be fine, she assured him. It's just a little darkness. There are candles in the kitchen pantry, flashlights in every room. His concern was evident even through the phone. I'll try to get home as soon as possible. Home. The word sent an unexpected warmth through her. When had his mansion started feeling like that? Don't rush, she said. I'm not afraid of storms. After they hung up, Dominica navigated through the shadowy house toward the kitchen, guided by the flashlight on her phone. She located the pantry and found an impressive array of emergency supplies, including elegant beeswax candles in crystal holders. She placed candles throughout the main living area, their golden light creating intimate pools of warmth in the vast space. The generator hummed to life, powering the security system and refrigerator, but leaving the rest of the house in romantic dimness. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling around the corners of the house. Dominica wrapped herself in a soft throw blanket and settled on the plush sofa, oddly enjoying the coziness created by the storm and candlelight. The front door opened with a gust of wind 2 hours later. Sam appeared in the doorway, his suit soaked despite the umbrella clutched in his hand. You didn't need to come home in this, Dominica said, rising to meet him. His eyes moved over her in the candlelight, lingering on the way the silk robe clung to her curves. I didn't like thinking of you here alone in the dark. I'm not afraid of the dark either, she teased, taking his dripping umbrella and setting it in the stand. No, you wouldn't be. Something like admiration colored his voice. You're not afraid of anything, are you? Dominica thought of the fear that gripped her when she considered her growing feelings for him. Feelings that complicated their arrangement and threatened her independence. Some things, she admitted softly. Sam shrugged out of his wet jacket, loosening his tie with one hand. "I brought dinner," he said, holding up a bag she hadn't noticed. "From that Italian place you mentioned liking." The thoughtful gesture touched her more than she wanted to admit. "You remembered." "I remember everything." "You tell me, Dominica." The simple statement held a weight that made her breath catch. While Sam changed into dry clothes, she set out the food on the coffee table, arranging the containers between candles. They ate in comfortable silence, the storm providing a dramatic soundtrack to their impromptu picnic. "How are you feeling?" Sam asked, his eyes dropping to her stomach. "The morning sickness is better today," she replied. "Though it's a misnomer. It seems to hit at random times." Sam frowned. "Is there anything I can do?" Dominica smiled at his helplessness. "Not unless you can reprogram my hormones." "If I could, I would." The sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter traitorously. After dinner, Sam disappeared briefly, returning with a bottle of massage oil. "Turn around," he instructed, his voice dropping to that commanding tone that never failed, to send heat pooling in her lower abdomen. Dominica complied, allowing him to position her with her back to him on the sofa. His strong hands worked the oil into her shoulders, finding knots of tension she hadn't realized she carried. "You don't have to do this," she murmured, though she made no move to stop him. "I want to," Sam replied, his thumbs pressing into a particularly tight spot that made her gasp. "I know this isn't what you planned, Dominica. Let me take care of you, at least in the ways you'll allow." His hands moved lower, working along her spine through the thin silk of her robe. The innocent massage gradually shifted as his touch became lighter, more sensual. When his lips replaced his fingers, pressing soft kisses to the nape of her neck, Dominica shivered despite the warmth of the room. "Sam," she whispered, his name both warning and invitation. He turned her to face him, the candlelight casting shadows across his chiseled features. "Tell me to stop," he challenged softly. Instead, Dominica reached for him, pulling his mouth down to hers. The kiss was hungry, desperate, a surrender to the desire that had simmered between them all day. Sam lifted her effortlessly, carrying her not to the bedroom, but to the plush rug before the fireplace. He laid her down with unexpected gentleness, the flames casting golden light across her skin as he unwrapped her like a precious gift. "You're so beautiful," he breathed, his eyes drinking in the sight of her. "Every inch of you." Lightning illuminated the room in stark flashes as his lips traveled across her skin, each touch dissolving another layer of her defenses. Dominica surrendered to the sensations cascading through her body, practical concerns evaporating like mist. Her fingers threaded through his hair, their silent communication more eloquent than words. Their lovemaking was different this time, slower, deeper, more deliberate. In the flickering candlelight, with rain lashing the windows and thunder shaking the foundations, Sam worshipped her body with reverent attention. When they finally joined, moving together in perfect harmony, Dominica looked up into his eyes and saw something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure, something that went far beyond desire or possession. Afterward, they lay tangled together before the dying fire, a cashmere throw pulled over their naked bodies. Sam's hand rested protectively over her stomach, his breathing deep and even against her shoulder. "This wasn't part of the plan," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Sam stirred, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. "What wasn't?" Dominica hesitated, suddenly vulnerable in the aftermath of their passion. "Feeling this way," his arm tightened around her. "And how do you feel?" She turned in his embrace, needing to see his face. In the dim glow of the remaining candles, his expression was more open than she'd ever seen it. Hopeful, uncertain, almost boyish in its vulnerability. "Like I'm starting to need you," she admitted, the confession costing her more than he could know. "And that terrifies me." Instead of the triumphant smile she half expected, Sam's expression grew serious. "I've needed you since that first night," he confessed, brushing his thumb across her cheek. "I just didn't know how to say it." The simple honesty of his words cracked something open inside Dominika. She kissed him then, pouring everything she couldn't yet say into the connection of their lips. Outside, the storm began to subside, rain softening to a gentle patter against the windows. But inside, another kind of storm was building, one that neither of them had anticipated and neither knew how to weather. Chapter 5, Hearts Aflame. "You're not wearing that." Sam's voice carried from the bedroom doorway, his tone leaving no room for argument. Dominika turned from the full-length mirror, one eyebrow arched in challenge. The crimson gown hugged her curves perfectly, the slight swell of her 4-month pregnancy barely noticeable beneath the flowing fabric. "Excuse me," she asked, her voice dangerously soft. Sam crossed the room in 3 long strides, his eyes darkening as they traveled the length of her body. "You can't wear this." His fingers traced the plunging neckline that revealed the swell of her breasts. "Every man at the gala will be staring at you." A slow smile spread across Dominika's face. "And that bothers you?" "Yes," he admitted without hesitation, his hand sliding possessively to her hip. "It bothers me a hell of a lot." She should have been offended by his possessiveness. Instead, a thrill raced through her at the naked desire in his eyes. "Too bad," she said, stepping away from his touch. "This is what I'm wearing." Sam caught her wrist, pulling her back against his chest. "Do you enjoy driving me crazy?" His breath was hot against her ear, sending shivers down her spine. "Immensely," she confessed, turning in his arms to face him. His mouth claimed hers in a kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. Hungry, demanding, possessive. Dominika melted against him, her hands fisting in the crisp material of his tuxedo. "Shirt! We're going to be late," she murmured when they finally broke apart. "They can't start without me," Sam reminded her, his hands sliding down to cup her backside through the silky material. "I'm the one receiving the award." The Butler Foundation Charity Gala was the social event of the season, bringing together Miami's elite to raise money for hurricane relief, a cause that hit close to home for Dominika. Despite living with Sam for months now, she still felt like an outsider in his world of wealth and privilege. "We should go," she insisted, reluctantly pulling away from his embrace. "Your adoring public awaits." Something flickered in Sam's expression. Concern, perhaps. "You know this means nothing to me, right? The award, the accolades, it's all just business." Dominika smoothed his bow tie with gentle fingers. "I know, but it matters to those who will benefit from the foundation's work." His smile was soft, intimate in a way that still surprised her. "When did you become my conscience?" Someone has to keep the mighty Sam Butler grounded. His laugh warmed her from the inside out. "Come on then," he said, offering his arm. "Let's go make the socialites of Miami green with envy." The ballroom of the Royal Palm Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and the flash of diamonds. As they entered, conversation briefly faltered, heads turning to watch their progress across the marble floor. Dominika felt the weight of curious stares and whispered comments. Everyone knew who Sam Butler was. Everyone wondered who she was to him. The tabloids had been speculating since they were first photographed together, theories ranging from gold digger to secret wife. Sam's hand rested possessively at the small of her back, his thumb tracing small circles against her spine through the thin fabric. "You look like a queen," he murmured, for her ears alone. Before she could respond, a tall, silver-haired man approached, clapping Sam on the shoulder. "Butler, finally decided to grace us with your presence. Maxwell." Sam shook the man's hand with practiced ease. "Allow me to introduce Dominika Davis." Maxwell's eyes lingered a moment too long on Dominica's décolletage before meeting her gaze. "Charmed," he said, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. "Sam's been keeping you all to himself. Now I see why." Sam's arm slid around her waist, a subtle but clear message of possession. "Dominica is opening a cafe downtown, the best coffee in Miami, once it's rebuilt." The simple way he referenced her dream, speaking about it as an inevitability rather than a possibility, warmed Dominica's heart. He'd never once suggested she abandon her plans for the cafe, despite his wealth making it unnecessary. "How unquaint," Maxwell replied, his smile not reaching his eyes. Before the awkward moment could extend, a waiter appeared with flutes of champagne. Sam took two, handing one to Maxwell while keeping the other. He signaled another waiter who approached. With a glass of sparkling water for Dominica, she accepted it with a small smile, touched by his attentiveness. Though they hadn't publicly announced her pregnancy, Sam's protective instincts had shifted into overdrive. As the evening progressed, Sam kept her close, his hand rarely leaving some part of her body, the small of her back, her elbow, her wrist. When he was called away briefly to speak with potential donors, Dominica found a quiet corner near the terrace doors, grateful for a moment to catch her breath. "He'll tire of you, you know." The cold voice came from behind her. Dominica turned, to find herself face to face with a stunning blonde, whose diamond necklace probably cost more than rebuilding her cafe. "I'm sorry," Dominica said. Though she had heard perfectly well, the woman sipped her champagne, blue eyes assessing Dominica over the rim. "Sam. He has a pattern. Becomes obsessed. Can't get enough, then—" She snapped her fingers. "Bored. And gone. You speak from experience, I presume." Dominica kept her voice level, despite the sudden clenching of her heart. A practiced laugh, musical and entirely false. "Victoria Ashford Butler." She extended a manicured hand. "Sam's ex-wife." Dominica accepted the handshake, keeping her expression neutral despite the shock. "Charming to meet you, isn't it?" Victoria's smile was shark-like. "I thought I should introduce myself to Sam's latest distraction." The carefully calculated pause made Dominica's hackles rise. "How considerate of you." Victoria moved closer, dropping her voice to a confidential whisper. "A word of advice, darling. Don't get too comfortable. Sam doesn't do long-term, not really. Not emotionally, and he definitely doesn't do common." The barb found its mark, but Dominica refused to show it. "Thank you for your concern," she replied evenly. "But I believe I understand Sam better than you think." Victoria's laugh held a brittle edge, revealing a glimpse of genuine pain beneath her polished exterior. "That confidence is familiar," she said, her eyes momentarily vulnerable before hardening again. "I once believed I understood him too." She reached out, adjusting one of Dominica's curls with calculated intimacy. "He's masterful at making you feel irreplaceable, until suddenly you're not. Ask yourself why a man so obsessed with control suddenly seems willing to surrender it." "For you," Dominica stepped back, removing herself from Victoria's touch. "Why are you telling me this?" Something genuine flashed in Victoria's eyes. Pain, perhaps, or regret, quickly masked. "Consider it a professional courtesy. One of Sam's women to another. There you are." Sam's deep voice sent relief flooding through Dominica as he appeared. At her side, his hand immediately finding the small of her back, his expression froze when he recognized Victoria. "What are you doing here?" "It's a charity event, darling." "I'm nothing if not charitable." Victoria's smile was saccharine. "I was just getting acquainted with your latest project." Sam's body tensed beside Dominica's. "Leave, now." "Don't be rude, Samuel. We're all adults here." Victoria glanced between Them, her gaze lingering on Dominica's waistline. Well, interesting development. Does she know about the others? There are no others. Sam's voice was ice. There's only been Dominica since the day I met her. Something in his tone made Dominica's heart stutter. She looked up at him, finding his eyes already on her, intense and unflinching. Victoria noticed the exchange, her perfect features hardening. "You've never looked at me that way," she said quietly, all pretense falling away for a moment. Not even in the beginning. Before Sam could respond, Victoria collected herself, mask slipping back into place. "Well, this has been illuminating. Enjoy the honeymoon phase, darling," she told Dominica, "and when it ends, remember I warned you." As she sashayed away through the crowd, Sam turned to Dominica, his expression taut with anger and concern. "What did she say to you?" Dominica considered deflecting, but the worry in his eyes deserved honesty. "That you'd tire of me, that I'm just the latest in a pattern." His jaw clenched. Victoria excels at poison. He took her hands in his thumbs brushing over her knuckles. "There is no pattern, Dominica. What I feel for you." He broke off, seeming to struggle with words, unusual for a man so articulate in business. "It's never happened before." The raw honesty in his voice made her throat tight. Before she could respond, the MC announced that dinner was about to be served, followed by the awards presentation. Throughout dinner, Sam kept her hand firmly in his beneath the table, as if afraid she might disappear. When he was called to the stage to receive his humanitarian award, his speech was brief but powerful, focusing on community resilience and the importance of rebuilding. "True strength," he concluded, his eyes finding Dominica's in the crowd, "is not in standing alone, but in finding someone worth standing beside." The ballroom erupted in applause, but Dominica barely heard it over the pounding of her heart. Was he talking about her? About them? Later, as they swayed together on the dance floor, Sam held her closer than propriety dictated, his cheek resting against her temple. "Did you mean what you said?" Dominica asked, her words nearly lost in the music. "About finding someone worth standing beside?" Sam pulled back enough to meet her eyes, his expression more vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. "I meant every word." His hand slid to the small bump of her stomach, hidden beneath the flowing fabric of her gown. "You and our child, you're becoming everything to me, Dominica. It terrifies me how much I need you both." The confession stole her breath. This was not the cold businessman who had proposed their arrangement months ago. This was a man transformed by love he hadn't sought and couldn't control. "Victoria," she began, "is bitter and jealous," Sam finished for her. "What we had was a business merger disguised as a marriage. She never touched my heart." His fingers tilted her chin up. "You live there now." In the middle of the glittering ballroom, surrounded by Miami's elite, Sam Butler kissed Dominica with such tender passion that several nearby couples stopped dancing to stare. It was a public declaration, a claiming, a promise. "Take me home," Dominica whispered against his lips when they finally parted. His eyes darkened with desire. "We haven't even had dessert." She pressed herself against him suggestively. "I have something sweeter in mind." Sam's laugh was low and wicked as he guided her toward the exit, ignoring the curious stares and Victoria's venomous glare from across the room. Later that night, as moonlight spilled across Sam's yacht anchored in the calm waters of Biscayne Bay, they lay entwined on the deck, a cashmere blanket protecting them from the gentle sea breeze. "I never told you why my marriage really ended," Sam said quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Dominica propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the silvery light. "You said she wasn't interested in children." "That was part of it." His eyes met hers, serious and searching. "But the truth is, I discovered she'd been having an affair with my CFO. Had been for years, apparently. Dominica's heart clenched at the betrayal he must have felt. "I'm sorry. I'm not. Not anymore." His hand cupped her cheek. "If Victoria had been faithful, I might still be trapped in a loveless marriage. I would never have met you in that hotel. Lobby? Never known what it feels like?" He trailed off, struggling again with words. What feels like?" she prompted softly. Sam pulled her down for a kiss that spoke volumes, his hands threading through her curls. "This," he whispered against her lips. "Whatever this is, Dominica, it's everything I never believed existed." Under the vast canopy of stars, their bodies joined again, moving together in perfect harmony as the gentle rocking of the yacht matched their rhythm. And as Dominica came apart in his arms, crying his name to the night sky, she finally admitted to herself what she'd been fighting for months. She was falling in love with Sam Butler, not his wealth or his power, but the man beneath the empire, the man who looked at her like she was the moon and stars combined, who touched her with reverent hands, who was slowly revealing his wounded heart to her one vulnerability at a time. And it was the most terrifying realization of her life. Chapter 6. Passionate Protection. The sharp pain came without warning, tearing through Dominica's abdomen as she reached for a book on Sam's library shelf. For a moment, she stood frozen, one hand pressed against the sudden discomfort, the other clutching the edge of a shelf for support. "It's nothing," she whispered to herself, trying to calm the immediate spike of fear. "Just normal pregnancy twinges." At 5 months along, her body had changed dramatically. Her slender frame now softened with curves, her formerly flat stomach rounded into a perfect dome that housed their growing child. Sam couldn't keep his hands off her, constantly touching. Her belly in wonder, his expression one of awe and possession each time the baby moved beneath his palm. As she straightened, another pain gripped her, sharper than the first. A small gasp escaped her lips as she stumbled to the nearest chair, lowering herself carefully. "Miss Davis, are you all right?" Maria, the housekeeper, appeared in the doorway, concern etched across her kind face. "I'm fine," Dominica began, but a third stab of pain made her fold forward with a cry she couldn't contain. Maria was at her side instantly. "I'm calling Mr. Butler, and then the doctor." "No, don't bother Sam," Dominica protested weakly. "He has that important merger meeting," but Maria was already on the phone, speaking rapid Spanish into the receiver before switching to English. "Mr. Butler, it's Miss Davis. Something's wrong." 20 minutes later, the front doors of the mansion burst open with such force that the decorative vase on the entryway table rattled. Sam appeared in the library doorway, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled, tie askew, jacket missing, eyes wild with fear. "Dominica!" He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees before her chair. "What happened? Where's the pain?" She tried to smile reassuringly, though another wave of discomfort made it grimace-like. "It's probably nothing. The baby moved into an awkward position or—" "Don't," Sam cut her off, his voice rough with emotion. "Don't downplay this." His hands covered hers, where they rested protectively over her stomach. "Maria called Dr. Reynolds. She's meeting us at Miami General." "The hospital? Sam, that's overreacting." "I don't care," he said fiercely, gathering her into his arms despite her protests. "I'm not taking chances with either of you." The raw fear in his voice silenced her objections. As he carried her to the waiting car, his arms trembling slightly with the strain of controlling his emotions, Dominica felt a wave of love so intense it nearly overwhelmed her. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of Sam's tense profile, his hand squeezing hers too tightly, his eyes darting constantly to her face and belly, as if his vigilance alone could prevent disaster. The emergency room staff parted like waves before Sam's commanding presence. Money and power had their privileges. A private room materialized instantly, a top specialist appeared within minutes, and nurses hovered attentively. Yet for all his influence, Sam looked utterly powerless as the monitors beeped, measuring the life signs of the woman and child who had become his world. Dominica watched his face as the doctor spoke, the muscle tightening in his jaw, the pallor beneath his tan, the barely perceptible tremor in his hand as it gripped hers. This was Sam Butler stripped of his armor, vulnerable in a way boardroom adversaries would never witness, just round ligament pain and elevated blood pressure, Dr. Reynolds explained, her experienced eyes missing nothing. The baby is developing perfectly, but your body is sending warning signals, Miss Davis. She turned to Sam, whose attention was laser-focused on her every word. She needs less stress, more rest, and careful monitoring. She'll have everything she needs, Sam replied, his voice carrying the same authority he used to close billion-dollar deals. Dr. Reynolds smiled slightly. I suspect that's part of the problem. Too much hovering can be its own stressor. She will, Sam promised before Dominica could respond. I'll make sure of it. Dominica shot him a look that promised a discussion later. Is there anything else we should be concerned about? Dr. Reynolds smiled reassuringly. The baby is developing perfectly, strong heartbeat, proper size for gestational age. But I want to see you in my office weekly from now on, not monthly. She turned to Sam. And yes, Mr. Butler, she can still have sex. Just be gentle. The doctor's blunt statement made Dominica blush, and Sam clear his throat uncomfortably. But as soon as Dr. Reynolds left, promising to return with discharge papers, Sam's composure cracked. He buried his face in Dominica's lap, his broad shoulders shaking with silent emotion. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed, his expression raw with vulnerability she'd never seen before. I thought I was losing you both, he confessed, voice ragged. When Maria called, I've never been so scared in my life. Dominica cradled his face in her hands. We're fine, Sam. The baby's fine. I can't lose you, he whispered, turning to press a kiss into her palm. Either of you. I wouldn't survive it. The naked honesty in his voice touched something deep within her. This was not the calculated businessman who had proposed their arrangement all those months ago. This was a man transformed by love he hadn't expected and couldn't control. You're not going to lose us, she promised, stroking his hair. We're stronger than you think. Later that evening, as steam filled the master bathroom, Dominica leaned back against Sam's chest in the oversized tub. Scented candles flickered. Around them, his idea, surprisingly, casting golden light across the water's surface. Thank you, she murmured as his hands worked fragrant oil into her shoulders, easing tension she hadn't realized she carried. For what? His voice rumbled against her back. For not treating me like I'm made of glass. She tilted her head, allowing him access to the tight muscles of her neck. For understanding I'm still me, just pregnant. His hands stilled momentarily. I'm trying, he admitted. When Maria called today, I've never felt terror like that before. Dominica turned in the water to face him, noting the lingering fear in his eyes. Water droplets clung to his eyelashes, making him look younger, more vulnerable than the financial titan the world knew. We're resilient, she assured him, framing his face with wet hands. Both of us. His eyes darkened as they traveled over her wet skin, appreciation and hunger mingling in his gaze. You're even more beautiful now, he said, one palm coming to rest on the swell of her belly. I never thought— What? She prompted when he faltered. Sam's expression shifted to something raw and honest. I never thought I could feel this way about anyone, like I'd sacrifice everything, my company, my fortune, my life, without hesitation. He was a bastard, Sam continued, his voice flat, cold, cruel. Nothing was ever good enough. His thumb traced circles on her stomach, a soothing gesture that seemed to calm him as much as the baby. My mother died when I was 8, cancer. After that, it was just him and me rattling around in that mansion like ghosts. Sam, Dominica murmured, reaching for his hand. He entwined their fingers, still not meeting her eyes. He never touched me, not with affection anyway. A handshake on my 18th birthday, a clap on the shoulder when I got into Harvard. A bitter smile twisted his lips, but he made sure I knew I was a disappointment in every way that mattered to him. Dominica's heart ached for the lonely boy he must have been. Is that why you work so hard? To prove him wrong? Sam looked up then, surprise flickering across his features. Yes, he admitted, though it's taken me 20 years to realize it. And is that why you wanted a child? To continue the Butler legacy? Something vulnerable passed across his face. At first, yes. But now, his hand spread across, her belly protectively. Now I want this baby because it's part of you, part of us. His voice dropped to a near whisper. But I'm terrified, Dominica. What if I become him? What if I don't know how to love our child properly? The fear in his eyes, so at odds with his usual confidence, made Dominica's throat tighten. With emotion, she shifted closer, framing his face with her hands. You are not your father, Sam Butler, she said fiercely. I've seen how you look at this baby on the ultrasound screen, how you talk to my belly when you think I'm asleep. You already love our child more than your father was capable of loving anyone. Sam's eyes glistened suspiciously in the soft lamplight. How can you be so sure? Because I've seen your heart, she said simply. The one you try so hard to hide. From the world, he pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. They stayed that way for long moments, the steady rhythm of their baby's movements, a gentle reminder of the future they were creating together. I need to shower, Dominica said eventually, wrinkling her nose. I smell like hospital antiseptic. Doctors' orders were to rest, Sam reminded her, but the shadow of fear had lifted from his expression. Then you'll have to help me, she replied, a mischievous smile playing at her lips, since I'm not supposed to exert myself. Sam's eyes darkened with desire, but uncertainty flickered across his face. Are you sure that's safe? Dominica laughed, the sound washing away the last of the day's tension. Dr. Reynolds gave us explicit permission, remember, just be gentle. The corner of his mouth lifted in a smile that sent heat pooling low in her body. I can be gentle, he promised, his voice dropping to that velvety register that never failed to make her shiver. In the massive master bathroom, steam filled the air as Sam carefully undressed her, his movements reverent. His hands lingered on the new curves of her body, caressing the swell of her breasts, the roundness of her hips, the perfect dome of her belly. You're more beautiful now than ever, he murmured, helping her step into the shower. Under the warm spray, Sam washed her with exquisite tenderness, his soapy hands gliding over her skin with a touch that started as nurturing but gradually transformed into something more sensual. When his fingers slipped between her thighs, Dominica gasped, her head falling back against his shoulder. Too much? He asked, immediately stilling his movement. Not enough, she breathed, guiding his hand back to where she needed him. Sam's chuckle rumbled against her back as he resumed his gentle exploration, his other arm wrapped protectively around her, supporting her weight as her knees weakened. With pleasure. Later, wrapped in plush towels, he carried her to their bed and laid her down with care that belied his strength. His lips traced a path of worship from her throat to her breasts, lingering on the sensitive peaks before continuing, down to the swell of her stomach. I love this, he whispered against her skin, seeing you carrying our child. The possessive pride in his voice sent a thrill through Dominica. She threaded her fingers through his damp hair, guiding him lower. Show me, she urged softly. Sam's eyes met hers, midnight dark with desire but tempered with concern. "If anything hurts, if you feel uncomfortable at all, I'll tell you," she promised. "Now stop talking." His laugh was muffled against her inner thigh as he settled between her legs, using his mouth and hands to build her pleasure with exquisite patience. When she came apart beneath his skilled attention, her cry of release echoed through the spacious bedroom. Afterward, as Sam gathered her against his chest, his hand splayed protectively over her belly, Dominica felt a peace she'd never known before. The hospital scare had stripped away another layer of Sam's carefully constructed walls, revealing the depth of his feelings more clearly than any words could have. "I never thought I'd have this," he murmured into her hair, his voice heavy with emotion. "Have what?" she asked, though something in her already knew the answer. Sam's arms tightened around her. "Family," he whispered, the single word carrying the weight of a lifetime of loneliness. Dominica turned in his embrace, needing to see his face. In the dim light of their bedroom, Sam Butler, billionaire, tycoon, the man whose name inspired fear in boardrooms across the country, looked suddenly young and vulnerable. "You have us now," she said softly, guiding his hand to where their baby kicked beneath her skin. "Always." The smile that bloomed across his face was so genuine, so full of wonder and gratitude, that Dominica felt her heart swell with emotions too complex to name. And as she drifted to sleep in the protective circle of his arms, she acknowledged the truth she could no longer deny. She was completely, irrevocably in love with Sam Butler. Not the powerful CEO, but the man beneath the armor, the one with the wounded heart who looked at her like she was the answer to questions he'd been afraid to ask. Chapter 7. Love's Bitter Ache. The manila envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, innocuous among the stack of mail that Maria placed on the breakfast table. Dominica barely noticed it as she sipped her herbal tea, scrolling through cafe design options on her tablet. At 6 months pregnant, she'd finally agreed to let Sam help finance her rebuilt cafe, though she insisted on maintaining creative control. "What do you think about these pendant lights?" she asked, turning the tablet toward him. Sam didn't respond. He sat frozen, staring at the contents of the envelope, his face drained of color. "Sam." Dominica set down her cup. "What's wrong?" His eyes flickered to hers, then back to the papers in his hand. Without a word, he slid them across the table. They were photographs, dozens of them. Dominica with different men, her face carefully photoshopped onto bodies in compromising positions. Interspersed among them were doctored text messages, fabricated bank statements showing large deposits to her account, and a manufactured contract that made her stomach turn. "What is this?" she whispered, her hands trembling as she pushed the vile images away. "You tell me." Sam's voice was deadly quiet, his eyes unreadable. "These are fake. You can't possibly believe." "There's a letter," he interrupted, holding up a sheet of expensive stationery. "It says you've been playing me from the beginning, that our chance meeting during the hurricane was orchestrated, that you've been sleeping with other men throughout our relationship." Dominica stared at him in disbelief. "And you believe that?" Sam's jaw tightened. "I don't know what to believe." The words struck like a physical blow. After everything they'd shared, the intimacy, the vulnerability, the growing trust, he could doubt her so easily. "Victoria," Dominica said suddenly, realization dawning. "This has her fingerprints all over it." "It doesn't matter who sent it," Sam said, his voice hardening. "What matters is whether it's true." Dominica pushed back from the table, one hand instinctively cradling her swollen belly. "The fact that you're even questioning me tells me everything I need to know about your trust in me, Sam." "I've been burned before," he reminded her, his expression shuddering. "Victoria." "I am not Victoria." Dominica's voice rose in frustration. "I have never lied to you, never manipulated you, never wanted anything from you except—" She stopped abruptly. "Except what?" Sam challenged, rising to his feet. "Except financial security, a wealthy father for your child? What, Dominica?" "Except you," she finished quietly. "Just you, Sam. Not your money or your name or your power." For a moment, something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. Then his gaze dropped to the fabricated evidence between them, and the walls slammed back into place. "I need—" Sam struggled visibly, his fingers whitening around the paper. "I've been through this before, Dominica." "No," she said firmly, rising to face him. "You haven't been through this before. You haven't been with me before. That's the difference you refuse to see." His expression flickered with uncertainty. "I want to believe you." "Then do," she challenged, her voice breaking slightly. "After everything we've shared, the things you've told me that you've never told anyone, how can you look at these obvious lies and give them any credence?" Sam's jaw worked as he fought a war within himself. "Experience has taught me to question everything that seems too good to be true." "And what was your experience with me supposed to be?" Dominica asked quietly. "A business transaction. My body in exchange for financial security. A contract." She placed a protective hand over her belly. "Yet here we are, with something that transcended those terms from the very first night. If either of us should be questioning motives, Sam, it isn't you." His back stiffened as if she'd struck him. Without another word, he walked out, leaving Dominica standing alone in the breakfast room, surrounded by the poisonous lies someone had crafted to destroy them. The thunderstorm that broke that evening matched Dominica's turbulent emotions perfectly. She stood at the bedroom window, watching lightning slash across the Miami skyline, wondering where Sam was. He hadn't returned all day, not even responding to her text messages. A soft knock at the door made her turn, hope flaring briefly. "Miss Davis?" Maria's kind face appeared in the doorway. "Would you like some dinner? You haven't eaten since breakfast." Dominica managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Maria, but I'm not hungry." The housekeeper hesitated. "Mr. Butler called. He's staying at the penthouse tonight." The words settled like ice in Dominica's chest. The penthouse, his private retreat in downtown Miami, where he went when he needed space from the world. From her. After Maria left, Dominica moved around the bedroom in a daze, gathering essential items into a small suitcase. She couldn't stay here, surrounded by reminders of a man who could believe the worst of her so easily. She was zipping the suitcase when the bedroom door opened. Sam stood there, rain-drenched and haggard, as if he'd been walking for hours. "What are you doing?" he asked, his eyes fixed on her luggage. "Leaving," Dominica answered simply. "There's nothing for me here if you don't trust me." Sam stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I went to see Victoria." Dominica stilled. "And?" She denied sending the package, of course. His voice was rough, exhausted, but she slipped, mentioned details that were only in the letter, not in our conversation. Hope flickered in Dominica's chest, but she tamped it down. "So you believe me now? After running to her instead of trusting me from the beginning?" Sam raked a hand through his wet hair. "I didn't know what to believe, Dominica, my entire adult life. People have wanted something from me, my money, my influence, my name." "And what do you think I want?" she challenged. "Nothing," he admitted, the fight draining from him. "That's what terrifies me. You've never asked for anything, never taken advantage." He stepped closer, his eyes haunted. "It's easier to believe you have an agenda than to accept that you might genuinely care for me." The vulnerability in his confession nearly broke her resolve, but the memory of his doubt, his willingness to believe the worst, strengthened her spine. "That's not good enough, Sam." She lifted her chin. "I'm carrying your child. I've shared your bed, your home, your life. If you don't know me by now, you never will." She moved toward the door, suitcase in hand. Sam didn't try to physically stop her, but his next words froze her in place. "I love you." 3 simple words, spoken with such raw honesty that Dominica felt her heart crack. She turned slowly to face him. "What did you say?" Sam looked more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him, rain still dripping from his hair, his expensive suit ruined. "I love you, Dominica. I've never said that to anyone before and meant it." He took a shaky breath. "And it terrifies me." For a long moment they stared at each other across the room, the weight of his confession hanging between them. Then Dominica shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Love without trust isn't love at all, Sam." She twisted the diamond bracelet from her wrist, an extravagant gift he'd given her weeks ago, and placed it on the dresser. "It's possession, control, fear, but it's not love." With those words, she walked past him and out of the bedroom, out of the mansion, and into the stormy night. The security guard called a taxi for her, his expression carefully neutral as he held an umbrella over her until the car arrived. As the taxi pulled away from the gates of the Butler estate, Dominica finally allowed herself to break down. Sobs, racking her body as she cradled her swollen belly. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered to her unborn child. "We'll be okay." But even as she spoke, the reassurance, she felt as if she'd left her heart behind in that mansion with a man too wounded to trust and too proud to heal. Sam stood at the bedroom window, watching the taxi disappear down the long driveway. In his hand, he clutched the diamond bracelet Dominica had left behind, the stones cutting into his palm as he squeezed it too tightly. He'd finally said the words he'd never spoken to another soul, laid bare the truth he'd only recently acknowledged. To himself, and she had walked away anyway. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his life building walls to protect himself from people who only wanted what he could provide. And then Dominica had come along, wanting nothing but him, and he'd driven her away with his inability to trust. Sam moved to the bed they'd shared, sinking down onto her side. Her scent still lingered on the pillow, jasmine and vanilla, uniquely her. He buried his face in it, inhaling deeply, an unfamiliar burning sensation behind his eyes. For the first time since his mother's death 30 years ago, Sam Butler wept. The sobs of a man who'd finally found something worth keeping, only to lose it through his own stubborn pride. Chapter 8. Undeniable Connection. 6 months passed, like a slow, healing wound. 6 months since Dominica had walked away from Sam's mansion, taking nothing but her dignity and their unborn child. 6 months of transformation, rebuilding her cafe, rediscovering her strength, and preparing for motherhood alone. The first months had been the hardest. Pregnancy hormones amplified her grief, midnight tears soaking her pillow while their daughter kicked inside her. She'd channeled that pain into creation, pouring herself into the resurrection of sweet solace. The insurance adjuster had been surprisingly generous, impressed by her detailed business records. The small business recovery grant covered what insurance didn't. Now she stood behind the gleaming counter of her reborn cafe, sun streaming through windows larger than before, highlighting the familiar ocean blue walls. The space breathed with new life, copper fixtures gleaming, expanded kitchen humming. With activity, comfortable seating areas inviting lingering conversations. Her grandmother, who had taught her both resilience and baking, would have recognized the spirit of the place, if not its enhanced form. "1 caramel latte and a slice of that banana bread?" requested a regular customer, a young lawyer who worked in the building across the street. Dominica smiled, her hands moving automatically through the familiar motions of crafting the perfect latte. As she worked, her 8-month pregnant belly nudged against the counter, a constant reminder of the connection she still shared with Sam, despite everything. She'd used the insurance money and a small business grant to rebuild, refusing to touch the cashier's check Sam had sent to her temporary apartment a week after she left. It remained in her drawer, uncashed. All 7 figures of it. Her pride wouldn't allow her to take his money, not when he'd questioned her integrity so fundamentally. The bell above the door chimed as another customer entered. Dominika looked up with her professional smile in place, only to have it freeze on her lips. Sam stood just inside the doorway, more casually dressed than she'd ever seen him in public, dark jeans and a simple navy sweater that made his eyes appear even bluer than she remembered. He looked thinner, his jaw shadowed with stubble, dark circles beneath his eyes, suggesting he hadn't been sleeping well. For a moment, neither of them moved. The cafe seemed to fall silent around them. Though logically, Dominika knew conversations continued, espresso machines hissed, and life went on. Finally, Sam approached the counter, stopping a respectful distance away. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his gaze taking in her rounded form with unconcealed longing. Dominika's heart thundered in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. "What are you doing here, Sam?" He glanced around the cafe, noting the customers watching them with undisguised curiosity. Could we talk privately? She shouldn't agree. She should tell him to leave, to respect the boundaries she'd established when she walked away. But the pain in his eyes matched the ache that had lived in her chest for 6 months. "Maya, cover the counter for a few minutes?" she asked her assistant, who nodded with wide eyes, clearly recognizing the famous Sam Butler. Dominika led him to the small office at the back of the cafe, conscious of his presence behind her, the familiar scent of his cologne bringing back a flood of memories she'd tried so hard to suppress. Once the door closed behind them, she turned to face him, unconsciously, resting one hand on her swollen belly. "What do you want, Sam?" "You never cashed the check," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I didn't want your money." She met his gaze steadily. "I never did." Sam swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I know that now. I think I always knew it." He stepped closer, hand outstretched, but not quite touching her. "How are you? How's the baby?" "We're both healthy," she replied, softening slightly. Despite everything he deserved to know about his child. "It's a girl." Something flickered in Sam's eyes, joy mixed with profound loss. "A daughter," he whispered. The wonder in his voice nearly undid her. "The doctor says she's perfect, strong heartbeat, proper growth, active." "Like her mother," Sam said, a small smile touching his lips. The familiar warmth of his gaze threatened to weaken Dominika's resolve. She stepped back, putting distance between them. "Why are you here, Sam?" "Really?" He drew a deep breath as if gathering courage, unusual for a man who commanded boardrooms with effortless authority. "I've spent 6 months trying to convince myself I can live without you," he began, his voice low and intense. "I've failed miserably." Dominika crossed her arms protectively over her chest. "You should have thought of that before you chose to believe Victoria's lies." "I know," he acknowledged, surprising her with his immediate acceptance of fault. "I betrayed your trust in the worst way possible. There's no excuse for it." "Then why?" she asked, the question that had haunted her for months finally spoken aloud. Sam's shoulders slumped slightly. "Fear," he admitted. "Not of losing my money or being used. Fear of loving someone so completely that losing them would destroy me." His eyes, vulnerable and honest, met hers. "And then I lost you anyway, through my own stupidity." The raw emotion in his voice made Dominika's throat tighten. She'd imagined this conversation countless times over the months, but never with Sam so completely stripped of his defenses. "What changed?" she asked softly. "I did." He ran a hand through his hair, disheveling it in a way that made him look younger, more approachable. I've been seeing a therapist, Dominica, trying to understand why I push away the people who matter most. A self-deprecating smile touched his lips. Turns out, my father did more damage than I realized. Dominica blinked in surprise. The Sam Butler she knew would never have admitted to needing help, especially not psychological support. "The cafe looks amazing," he said, changing the subject. "You did all this yourself?" "Yes," she confirmed, pride evident in her voice. "Every detail, from the floor plan to the menu." Sam's eyes swept the small office, noting the framed photo of the original cafe on the wall. "You didn't use my check?" "No." "Why not?" Dominica held his gaze. "Because I needed to do this myself, to prove I could." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "To prove you didn't need me?" "Yes," she admitted quietly. Sam moved closer, stopping just short of touching her. "And did you prove it?" "Yes," Dominica answered honestly. "I don't need you, Sam." Pain flashed across his features, but before he could respond, she continued. "But I want you," she whispered, surprising herself with the admission. "Every day, for the past 6 months, I've wanted you. I've missed your voice, your laugh, the way you hold me." Her voice caught. "I hate that I still love you." The words hung between them, a confession she hadn't meant to make. Sam's breath audibly caught, his eyes widening with hope. "You love me?" he asked, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "God help me, I do," Dominica said, finally allowing the tears she'd been fighting to fall. "But I can't be with someone who doesn't trust me, Sam. I won't do that to myself or our daughter." In 3 quick steps, Sam closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face with exquisite gentleness. "I trust you more than I've ever trusted anyone," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "I was a fool, Dominica. A terrified, damaged fool who nearly lost the best thing that ever happened to him because he couldn't believe someone might love him for himself." Before she could respond, he dropped to his knees before her, his hands moving to cradle her swollen belly. The gesture, so reminiscent of the moment she'd told him she was pregnant, broke something open inside her. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," Sam said, looking up at her with eyes that held no calculation, no walls, only raw, honest emotion. "But I'm asking for another chance, not because of the baby, though I want to be a father to our daughter more than I've ever wanted anything. But because I love you, Dominica Davis. I love your strength, your integrity, your fierce independence." His voice cracked slightly. "I love the way you see me. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, but just me." Dominica's hands moved of their own accord to thread through his hair. "I need time, Sam," she whispered, though her resolve was crumbling with every word. "Trust isn't rebuilt overnight." "I'll wait," he promised instantly, "however long it takes. Just don't shut me out completely." As if sensing the emotional moment, their daughter kicked vigorously, causing Sam's eyes to widen in wonder against Dominica's belly. "She knows your voice," Dominica admitted reluctantly. I've told her about you." Sam looked up, hope blazing in his eyes. "You have? She deserves to know her father, regardless of what happens between us." He rose slowly, his hands still gentle on her belly. "And what about her mother? What does she want?" Dominica took a shuddering breath, torn between self-protection and the love that had never died, despite her best efforts. "Her mother wants—" Before she could finish, the baby kicked again, harder this time, making her gasp. Sam's hands, instinctively, steadied her, and suddenly they were closer than they had been in months, his familiar scent enveloping her, his breath warm against her face. "Tell me to leave, and I will," he murmured, though it clearly cost him to say the words. Instead of answering, Dominica found herself rising on tiptoe, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that began as a whisper, but quickly blazed into something fierce and hungry. 6 months of longing, of stubborn pride, of sleeping in a cold bed without his arms around her, all of it melted away in the heat of their reconnection. Sam groaned against her mouth, his hands sliding from her belly to her back, pulling her, as close as her pregnant form would allow. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've missed you so damn much," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. Dominica's hands fisted in his sweater, torn between pushing him away and pulling him closer. "This doesn't fix everything," she warned, though her body betrayed her with its eager response to his proximity. "I know," Sam acknowledged, pressing gentle kisses to her cheeks, her eyelids, the corner of her mouth. "But it's a start." The rational part of her brain urged caution, reminded her of the painful way he'd doubted her, but her heart, which had been half-functioning since she walked away from him, surged back to full life at his touch. "Come home," he whispered against her lips. "Not to the mansion. That was never really home for you, but to me, Dominica, come back to me." She pulled back slightly, needing to see his eyes. What she found there, love, remorse, hope, and yes, trust, made her decision for her. "Yes," she whispered, the single syllable carrying the weight of forgiveness, of a second chance, of a future reclaimed. Sam's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, transforming his face in a way that made her heart stutter. Before she could say anything else, he was kissing her again, his mouth demanding yet tender, claiming yet giving. He backed her against the wall of her small office, his body pressing against hers, with a restraint that told her how desperately he wanted. "We can't," she gasped, as his lips found the sensitive spot beneath her ear. "Not here." A wicked gleam entered his eyes. "Your office, your cafe, your rules," he murmured, nipping gently at her earlobe. "But I've fantasized about this for 6 months, Dominica, having you back in my arms." The raw need in his voice matched her own desperate hunger. 6 months of anger and hurt dissolved in the heat between them, replaced by an urgent, primal need to reclaim what they'd lost. "Lock the door," she ordered, surprising herself with her boldness. Sam's eyes darkened with desire as he reached behind him to turn the lock. Then he was back, his hands gentle on her curves, yet demanding in their exploration, relearning her changed body with reverent attention. "You're even more beautiful now," he murmured, his palms splaying across her belly before sliding lower. When he dropped to his knees before her for the second time, his intentions entirely different, Dominica had to bite her lip to stifle a moan. Through the haze of pleasure, as Sam used his mouth and hands to remind her body of everything they'd shared, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. Some connections were simply undeniable, some bonds unbreakable, even by pride, fear, or misunderstanding. What she and Sam shared transcended logic or caution. It was elemental, essential, as necessary as breathing, and as she came apart under his skilled attention, his name a breathless prayer on her lips, Dominica finally surrendered. To the truth she'd been fighting for 6 long months. Home wasn't a place. It was a person. And for her, that person would always be Sam Butler. Chapter 9. Primal Bond. "Sam, something's wrong." The words, spoken in the darkness of their bedroom, jolted Sam from the edge of sleep. He sat up instantly, reaching for the lamp beside the bed. In the sudden flood of light, he found Dominica sitting upright, both hands pressed against her swollen belly, her face contorted in pain. The sheets beneath her were damp. "The baby!" she gasped, gripping his arm with surprising strength. "She's coming!" Fear and adrenaline surged through Sam's veins. It was too early, 3 weeks before her due date. "I'm calling Dr. Reynolds," he said, already reaching for his phone. Dominica nodded, her breathing shallow as another contraction seized her. "They're close together," she managed when it passed. "Too close for a first baby." Sam's fingers trembled slightly as he dialed, his other hand never leaving Dominica's. When the doctor answered, her calm instructions steadied him somewhat. "Get her to Miami Memorial immediately," Dr. Reynolds directed. "I'll meet you there. And Sam, drive carefully. You're no use to her if you crash." The 20-minute drive to the hospital was the most terrifying of Sam's life. Dominica alternated between pained silence during contractions and forced calm between them, trying to reassure him even as her own fear was evident in her eyes. "The baby will be fine," she whispered during one such moment, her hand squeezing his across the console. "We'll be fine." Sam brought her fingers to his lips, pressing a fervent kiss to her knuckles. "Both of you better be," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I can't lose either of you." At the hospital, everything accelerated. Dr. Reynolds was waiting, her efficient calm a counterpoint to Sam's barely contained panic as Dominica was whisked into an examination room. "We're noting some decelerations in the baby's heart rate during contractions," Dr. Reynolds explained, her calm professionalism reassuring despite the seriousness of her words. "With the early labor and these patterns, I recommend we proceed with a C-section as a precaution." Sam felt the blood drain from his face. Are they in danger?" Dr. Reynolds placed a steady hand on his arm. "Early intervention gives us the best outcome. Dominica is young and healthy, and the baby has been developing well. We have an excellent team ready." Her confidence was more reassuring than false promises would have been. While nurses efficiently prepared the surgical suite, Dominica gripped Sam's hand with surprising strength. In that moment, her mask of bravery slipped, revealing the fear she'd been hiding. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice barely audible. The vulnerability in those two words nearly broke him. This woman, who had faced hurricanes, financial ruin, and his own emotional walls, was finally allowing herself to lean on him completely. Sam brought her knuckles to his lips, his kiss a solemn vow. "I'm right here," he promised, voice steady despite the terror coursing through him. "We're going to meet our daughter today, and I'm not leaving your side for a second." In the operating room, Sam sat near Dominica's head, a surgical mask covering the lower half of his face, his eyes revealing the emotions he couldn't voice. Behind the blue curtain that shielded her view, doctors worked quickly to deliver their daughter. "Talk to me," Dominica pleaded, her voice trembling with the combination of medication, fear, and the strange sensations of the surgery. "Distract me." Sam leaned close, his forehead nearly touching hers. "Do you remember our first night together?" he murmured, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "How you came to my estate ready to refuse my proposition, but left tangled in my sheets instead." A small smile touched her lips despite the circumstances. "You were so arrogant." "I was captivated," he corrected, stroking her hair away from her face. "From the moment I saw you in that hotel lobby during the hurricane, something inside me recognized you." His voice dropped even lower, "like my soul had been waiting for yours." Tears gathered in the corners of Dominica's eyes. "You never told me that." "I've never told anyone half the things I've told you," Sam admitted, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that escaped. "You broke through every wall I built." "I love you," she whispered, the words so much easier now than they had been months ago. "No matter what happens." "Don't," Sam interrupted, his voice fierce despite its softness. "Nothing's going to happen to you, or our daughter." A sudden flurry of activity behind the curtain was followed by the most beautiful sound Sam had ever heard, the indignant wail of a newborn taking her first breath. "She's here," Dr. Reynolds announced, her voice warm with relief. "Strong lungs on this little one." Tears streamed freely down Sam's face as a nurse brought their daughter around the curtain, tiny and perfect, her skin still slick from birth. Would Dad like to cut the cord? The nurse asked. Dad. The word struck Sam with unexpected force as he rose on shaky legs. Following the nurse's instructions, he severed the physical connection between Dominica and their child, even as he felt a new, unbreakable bond forming within his heart. She's beautiful, he whispered, watching as they cleaned and swaddled the tiny girl. She has your eyes. Dominica smiled weakly, the medication making her drowsy. All babies have dark eyes at birth, she murmured. They might change. Not hers, Sam said with certainty. She'll have your eyes, your strength. He looked down at Dominica with such naked adoration that several nurses exchanged knowing glances. Your heart. While the doctors finished Dominica's surgery, a nurse placed their daughter in Sam's arms. He stood frozen, terrified of the fragile life he now held. Support her head, the nurse instructed gently. Yes, like that. You're a natural. He wasn't. Sam had never felt less natural at anything in his life, but as he gazed down at his daughter's tiny face, something primal and protective unfurled in his chest. Hello, little one, he whispered, his voice breaking. I'm your dad. The words felt foreign, yet completely right on his tongue. And I promise, I will never let anyone hurt you, never let you doubt for a single moment that you are loved. He glanced at Dominica, still being tended to by the surgical team. Just like I'll never let your mother doubt it again. Hours later, in the private recovery suite Sam had arranged, Dominica lay propped against pillows, their daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. The emergency had passed. Both mother and child declared healthy despite the early delivery. She needs a name, Dominica said softly, tracing one finger along the baby's perfect cheek. We never did decide. Sam sat on the edge of the bed, unable to take his eyes off either of them. What about Sophia? He suggested. It means wisdom. Sophia, Dominica tested the name, smiling when the baby stirred slightly. I think she approves. Sophia Aurora Butler, Sam's breath caught. You want her to have my last name? Dominica met his gaze steadily. She's your daughter, Sam, in every way that matters. The simple statement, delivered without hesitation, made his throat tight with emotion. And you? He asked, taking her free hand in his. Will you take my name too? Her eyes widened slightly. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Not yet, Sam said, bringing her fingers to his lips. When I propose, you'll know it. It won't be in a hospital room after you've just had major surgery. His eyes held, promises for their future. But soon, Dominica's smile was radiant despite her exhaustion. I might say yes, she teased. If you ask nicely. Sam's laugh was low and intimate. I'll do better than nice. As if sensing the intensity of the moment between her parents, little Sophia whimpered softly. Dominica shifted, wincing slightly from her stitches as she adjusted the baby against her breast. Here, Sam said, reaching for a pillow to support her arm. Let me help. His attentiveness nearly brought fresh tears to Dominica's eyes. This was a different Sam than the calculating businessman who had proposed their arrangement nearly a year ago. Softer, more vulnerable, yet somehow stronger in the ways that truly mattered. As the night deepened outside their hospital window, Sam stretched out carefully beside Dominica on the bed, mindful of her surgical wound. Together, they watched their daughter sleep, marveling at her tiny features, the perfect miniature fingernails, the bow of her lips, so like her mother's. I never imagined this, Sam confessed quietly, his arm gentle around Dominica's shoulders. Having a family, feeling this way. What way? She asked, looking up at him with eyes soft with exhaustion and love. Complete, he answered simply. Like everything in my life before was just preparation for this moment. Later, after a nurse had taken Sophia to the nursery for monitoring, a Precaution due to her early arrival, Sam helped Dominika clean up, his touch gentle as he bathed her face with a warm cloth, combed her tangled curls, and helped her into a fresh gown. "You don't have to do this," she protested weakly, though she made no move to stop him. "I want to," Sam replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Let me take care of you, for once." Too exhausted to argue, Dominika surrendered to his ministrations, his touch both comforting and somehow sensual, despite the clinical setting and her post-surgical state. When he finished, she caught his hand, bringing it to her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being here, for not leaving when things got scary." Sam's expression grew serious as he sat beside her on the bed. "I'll never leave again, Dominika. Not you, not Sophia." He cradled her face in his hands with exquisite gentleness. "You two are everything to me now." The vulnerability in his eyes made her heart ache with tenderness. This powerful man who commanded empires had been completely undone by a tiny 7-pound baby and the woman who carried her. "I believe you," Dominika said softly, the words carrying the weight of forgiveness, of trust rebuilt. Sam's smile was brilliant with relief. He leaned forward, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that began gentle but quickly deepened, mindful of her condition, yet unable to contain the desire that always simmered between them. "I've missed touching you," he confessed against her mouth. "These past weeks have been torture," Dominika laughed softly. "Doctor's orders," she reminded him. "No sex in the final month." "And now?" he asked, his lips trailing to the sensitive spot beneath her ear. She pulled back, arching an eyebrow despite the heat his touch ignited. "I just had major surgery, Sam. There's a 6-week recovery period." His groan of frustration made her laugh. Again, the sound pure joy in the quiet hospital room. "I'll wait," he promised, pressing a final lingering kiss to her lips. "You're worth waiting for." As Dominika drifted towards sleep, Sam's arms securely around her, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here, from a hurricane-ravaged cafe to a hospital delivery room, from a cold business proposition to the forging of a family. It had been a path neither of them could have anticipated. "I love you," she murmured sleepily against his chest. "Both the man you were when we met and the man you've become." Sam's arms tightened fractionally around her. "I love you more than I knew was possible," he whispered into her hair. "You and Sophia are my heart now, walking outside my body." The poetic words, so unlike his usual practical speech, were the last thing Dominika heard before sleep claimed her. She drifted off, secure in the knowledge that the primal bond formed this night between mother, father, and child was stronger than any storm life might send their way. Chapter 10. Eternally Entwined. Sunset painted the Miami sky in breathtaking shades of gold and crimson as Dominika walked barefoot along the private stretch of beach behind Sam's mansion. 4 months had passed since Sophia's birth, transforming their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The cafe was thriving under Maya's management, while Dominika split her time between motherhood and developing new recipes. Sam had restructured his entire business approach, delegating more responsibility to his executives to spend afternoons with his daughter, often bringing her to the cafe in a carrier strapped to his chest, a sight that never failed to make Dominika's heart flutter. She paused, toes digging into the cool sand as the waves lapped gently at the shore. The weight of the day's heat had begun to lift, leaving behind a perfect evening warmth. Sam had asked her to meet him here at sunset, arranging for Maria to watch Sophia for a few hours, for adult conversation. He'd said with a wink that suggested conversation might not be the only thing on his agenda. The thought sent a pleasant shiver through her body. The doctor had cleared her for all activities 6 weeks after Sophia's birth, and Sam had wasted no time reacquainting himself with every inch of her body, worshipping the new curves and subtle changes with reverent attention. "You're even more beautiful now," he'd whispered that first night, his hands tracing the silvery stretch marks on her hips with tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. Their lovemaking had evolved, deeper, more intense, yet somehow more playful too. Parenthood had softened some of Sam's hard edges while strengthening others, creating a man who could cradle his daughter with infinite gentleness one moment and negotiate ruthless business deals the next. "Thinking about me," the deep voice behind her made Dominica turn. Sam stood a few yards away, more casually elegant than she'd ever seen him, in linen pants rolled at the ankles and an untucked white shirt with sleeves pushed to his elbows. He held 2 glasses of champagne, golden bubbles catching the fading sunlight. "Always," she admitted, accepting the glass he offered. "Though I was actually wondering why you arranged this sunset rendezvous." Sam's smile was mysterious as he clinked his glass against hers. "I wanted you to myself for a while. Is that so suspicious?" Dominica sipped the excellent champagne, studying him over the rim. "With you? Yes." His laugh was warm, unguarded in a way it hadn't been when they first met. "Walk with me." They strolled along the water's edge, comfortable silence stretching between them as the sky's colors deepened. Sam kept one hand at the small of her back, the warmth of his palm seeping through the thin fabric of her sundress. "Do you remember the night we met?" he asked suddenly. "During the hurricane?" Dominica smiled at the memory. "You lent me your jacket and opened your suite to a complete stranger." "Not completely selfless," he admitted, his fingers tracing small circles against her spine. "I couldn't take my eyes off you, even drenched and devastated." "I thought you were arrogant and entitled," she confessed with a teasing smile. "I was," Sam acknowledged without hesitation. "Until you." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You changed everything, Dominica." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Sam, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I had everything a man could want, money, power, respect, but I had nothing that mattered." His free hand reached up to cup her cheek. "I was empty, Dominica, a hollow man pretending to be whole." The vulnerability in his voice made her throat tighten with emotion. She remained silent, sensing he needed to say these words. "Then you walked into my life, fierce, independent, unwilling to be bought." A smile touched his lips. "You drove me crazy, still do sometimes." "The feeling is mutual," she murmured, leaning into his touch. "I know I hurt you," Sam continued, his expression growing serious. "Doubted you when I should have trusted you above everyone. It's my greatest regret." "We've moved past that," Dominica assured him, but he shook his head. "I need to say this." He set his champagne glass down in the sand, taking hers and doing the same. With both hands now free, he clasped her fingers between his. "When you left, I realized something I should have known from the beginning. You were never a transaction to me, Dominica. You were a transformation." The setting sun cast his features in golden light, highlighting the sincerity in his eyes. "You and Sophia have given me the one thing my money could never buy, a heart capable of love." Before Dominica could respond, Sam dropped to one knee, in the wet sand, indifferent to his expensive linen pants. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "I promised you would know when I was proposing," he reminded her, his voice rough with emotion. "So let me be absolutely clear." He opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds. The exact shade of green he'd once told her reminded him of life returning after a storm. "Dominica Davis, I love you more than I ever believed possible. Not for what you give me, but for who you've helped me become." His eyes, vulnerable yet certain, held hers. "Will you marry me? Not because of Sophia, not because of convenience or security, but because I want to spend every day of my life showing you what you mean to me." Tears filled Dominica's eyes, spilling over to trace warm paths down her cheeks. A year ago, she'd been a cafe owner with modest dreams and fierce independence. Now she stood on a private beach being proposed to by a billionaire who had transformed as profoundly as she had during their tumultuous journey together. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Sam, I'll marry you." The smile that illuminated his face was worth every tear, every heartache, every moment of doubt they'd endured. He slid the ring onto her finger before rising to his feet and pulling her into his arms. His mouth claimed hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly blazed into something more primal, his hands tangling in her hair as he angled her head. To deepen the connection, Dominica melted against him, her body instantly responsive to his touch as it had been from the very beginning. "I want you," he murmured against her lips, his hands sliding down to cup her backside through the thin fabric of her dress. "Right here." Dominica pulled back slightly, glancing around the deserted beach. "Someone could see us." "It's private property for a mile in each direction," Sam reminded her, his lips trailing down her neck to the sensitive juncture of her shoulder. "And I've wanted to make love to you on this beach since the day you moved in." The thought was scandalously tempting. Dominica felt desire pool low in her belly as Sam's hands continued their possessive exploration, his touch both familiar and thrilling. "What if someone walks by?" she asked, though her resistance was weakening with each skilled caress. Sam's smile was wicked against her skin. "Then they'll see how completely I worship my fiancé." The word, fiancé, sent a thrill through her that eclipsed any remaining inhibition. With a boldness that still sometimes surprised her, Dominica pressed herself against him, feeling his immediate physical response. "Show me," she challenged softly, her fingers already working at the buttons of his shirt. Their lovemaking was passionate, yet tender, a perfect reflection of the relationship they'd forged through trial and transformation. As waves lapped at the shore just feet away, they moved together on Sam's hastily discarded shirt, their bodies remembering each other's rhythms perfectly despite the novel setting. When they lay sated in each other's arms, watching stars emerge. In the darkening sky, Sam traced lazy patterns on the bare skin of her back. "I never thanked you," he said quietly. Dominica propped herself up on one elbow, her hair falling in tousled waves around her shoulders. "For what?" "For giving me a loan when I needed it most." She frowned slightly, confused. "I never loaned you anything." Sam's smile was soft in the growing darkness. "You gave me a baby," he explained, his fingers brushing against her cheek with reverent tenderness. "But more importantly, you loaned me your trust when I hadn't earned it. Your faith when I didn't deserve it." His voice deepened with emotion. "You loaned me the chance to become a better man." Tears pricked Dominica's eyes again. "That wasn't a loan," she whispered. "It was an investment." Sam laughed softly, pulling her closer against his chest. "The returns have exceeded expectations. I hope." "Beyond calculation," she assured him, pressing a kiss over his heart. They dressed slowly, reluctant to end their private celebration, but eager to return to Sophia. As they walked hand in hand back toward the illuminated mansion, Dominica marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "I never planned on you," she said, squeezing his fingers. "When I opened that cafe, I thought it was my whole future." "And now?" Sam asked, raising their joined hands to kiss her knuckles just above her new engagement ring. Dominica stopped, turning to face him with the mansion lights creating a golden halo around them. "Now I know it was just the beginning. The hurricane didn't destroy my future. It delivered it." Sam's eyes darkened with an emotion too complex for simple definition. Desire, gratitude, reverence, and something deeper, more permanent than passion alone. "I approached you wanting one thing," he said, his voice deepening with emotion, but discovered something I never knew existed. His fingers traced the curve of her cheek with reverent precision. What began as desire became devotion. What started as addiction transformed into something sacred. As his lips found hers beneath the infinite night sky, Dominica surrendered to the truth their journey had revealed. Their beginning, unconventional, transactional, even calculating, had somehow alchemized into something profound. The hurricane that destroyed her cafe had been the catalyst for rebuilding not just her business, but two souls damaged in different ways. In Sam's embrace, with little Sophia sleeping peacefully in the home they were creating together, Dominica recognized the beautiful irony of their story. She'd feared losing her independence to this powerful man, only to discover that true freedom came in their mutual surrender. He'd sought an heir, but found a heart. She'd accepted a business proposition, but discovered a partnership of equals. Their souls, once separate, now existed as complementary halves of something greater, eternally entwined.